Ready? In today's world, environmentalism sells. Everywhere you look, companies are branding themselves as eco-friendly, sustainable, or green.
I hope we didn't keep you waiting.
Mother Nature, welcome to Apple. How was the weather getting in?
The weather was however I wanted it to be. Let's cut to the chase.
Consider the term greenwashing, coined by environmentalist Jay Westerveld in the 1980s. This stemmed from an observation he made while staying at a hotel. The guests were being asked to reuse their towels under the pretense of helping the planet. However, Westerveld noticed the hotel wasn't actually making meaningful efforts to reduce waste or conserve energy elsewhere. Instead, the towel program seemed more focused on cutting laundry costs rather than actually protecting the environment.
So at the highest level, greenwashing is a kind of deceptive practice. It's giving people the impression that you are more environmentally positive or more environmentally responsible than you actually are.
What's even trickier about greenwashing is that it really doesn't always look the same. Companies have spent decades planning strategies on how to mislead us, all with the goal of being as convincing as possible. So how do they do it? To answer this question, let's take a look at the 3 most common types of greenwashing. First up, buzzwords. Words like green or eco-friendly are everywhere, but they don't always mean anything at all. Without clear details or proof, these terms can just be thrown around to make a product sound way better than it actually is. Next is carbon offsets. Some companies claim they're quote-unquote carbon neutral by investing in projects like planting trees or supporting clean energy. The problem is that this doesn't actually fix the damage caused by their direct pollution. It's like buying a get-out-of-jail-free card. Then there's double dipping. It's when companies take credit for doing the absolute bare minimum. For example, if they're legally required to follow certain environmental rules and then act like they're doing something extra special. They're not going above and beyond by any means. They're simply just following the law. These practices are more than just misleading. They can have some serious consequences.
The number one problem is that if someone's deceiving you about the good they're doing, they're not actually doing that good that you're hoping is there. I think the second is the deception of individuals and the deception even of governments and regulators. If regulators think that companies are doing well, right? Like if they're making these green claims and it really seems like there's a lot of activity from like fast fashion retailers or oil and gas or whoever, and they've really got their act together, then it makes it seem not so urgent to have strong regulation or to have a lot of scrutiny on those areas. And I think there's another missed opportunity there, or like just missed time to check whether these things are actually proceeding at the pace they should be.
So we've seen how greenwashing can take on a variety of different forms, but why is it so prevalent? To understand this, we need to take a look at the industries that are most vulnerable to these practices. Industries with significant environmental impacts that really feel the pressure to appear greener than they actually are.
So oil and gas is big for this, right? They get a ton of scrutiny because their product is poisonous and explosive and can damage local waterways and is associated with climate change. So there's a lot of attention on what they do. There's a lot of press when it goes wrong, because when it goes wrong, it's often horrific in scale and impact.
Addressing the tailings challenge is important to us as a company and to our stakeholders.
For companies in the oil sands, the problem of tailings ponds has proven to be a difficult nut to crack. The pools of wastewater now cover large areas of the boreal forest. And on Saturday, Alberta's energy regulator reported that at one of Suncor's tailing sites, a number of animals had been discovered dead.
A ton of scrutiny on them, and then you see that reaction where they go.
We are disappointed in this recent performance. We can and will do better. I promise you that.
And it's not just oil. Industries like fast fashion and aviation do the same thing. Fast fashion brands will advertise collections made with recycled materials, but behind the scenes, overproduction and waste persist. Airlines tout carbon offset programs while continuing to rely heavily on fossil fuels. Even financial institutions and governments aren't exempt. They promote green investment, but continue funding projects that drive deforestation and increased emissions. These industries use greenwashing to maintain their business models while trying to recover their public image. So what's being done to fight this? In Canada, one of the primary tools against greenwashing is what's called the Competition Act. This act aims at holding companies accountable when they deceive the public by making false environmental claims.
Whenever a company makes a false or misleading statement, people can file a complaint to the Competition Bureau. Then they launch this investigation if they think that the complaint is a serious one, and then they can even sue the company, and eventually the company can be requested to pay some fines. So we've seen it with Volkswagen, for instance.
Nitrogen dioxide causes asthma, it causes strokes, it causes birth abnormalities. It causes people to die earlier than they should do. And Volkswagen took a decision to fit technology and software to their vehicle, knowing that their cars will produce much more, in the case of the US, 40 times more pollution on the road than they were allowed to.
In September of 2015, the US Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, revealed that Volkswagen had installed quote-unquote defeat devices in its diesel vehicles to cheat emissions tests. These devices detected when the car was undergoing official emissions testing and temporarily reduced emissions to comply with legal standards. However, during regular driving conditions, these vehicles emitted up to 40 times the allowable levels of nitrogen oxides, which is a harmful pollutant linked to respiratory and environmental problems. The scandal affected around 11 million vehicles worldwide, including 500,000 in the US, spanning multiple Volkswagen and Audi models. Following this disclosure, Volkswagen admitted to the deception, leading to massive financial repercussions, including over $30 billion in fines, recalls, and settlements. Key executives resigned, and the scandal significantly damaged the company's reputation.
Volkswagen has broken the trust of our customers and the public here in America. So let's be clear about this. Our company was dishonest with the EPA and the California Air Resources Board, and with all of you. And in my German words, we have totally screwed up.
Under this act, companies are required to back up their environmental claims with solid evidence. However, this is where things get a little tricky, because now the burden of proof lies with the companies themselves. This means that instead of the Competition Bureau having to prove a company is engaging in greenwashing, it's actually the company's responsibility to prove that their claims are truthful.
A lot of companies were not very happy with that, especially companies from the oil sector. Why? Because they're wondering what type of proof do you need. So let's say you're a company that wants to make a net zero pledge. I need to have evidence, fair, but which evidence? What type of evidence? Which standard should I use? Because the law doesn't say which type of proof you need to have. And as a response to that, the Competition Bureau said that they would publish guidelines about substantiation.
With companies having to prove their claims, it's now more important than ever for us to stay informed and skeptical about what we're being told, because this is where consumer awareness comes into play. One tool that we can use to help navigate all of this confusion is eco-labels. These are certifications that indicate a product meets certain environmental standards. There are three main types of eco-labels to be aware of: Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3. Each type serves a purpose, but they have their own strengths and weaknesses. Type 1 labels are the most reliable. These are granted by third-party organizations that conduct rigorous audits to ensure a product meets strict sustainability criteria. Labels like the Rainforest Alliance or Forest Stewardship Council fall into this category, helping the consumers identify products with proven environmental or ethical benefits. Type 2 labels are self-declared by companies. They allow businesses to market products as environmentally friendly without any sort of external verification. While this makes certification faster and easier, it leaves a lot of room for vague or misleading claims. Finally, Type 3 labels are data-driven. They provide detailed information about a product's life cycle, including its environmental impact during production, use, and disposal. Examples include cradle-to-cradle certifications, which ensure transparency for consumers who want a comprehensive understanding of a product's sustainability. But just like environmental claims themselves, not all eco-labels are created equal. It's important for us to understand that while eco-labels can guide consumers, they aren't perfect.
One common problem with these schemes is that they tend to only assess specific criteria. So they don't focus on the whole supply chain, the whole life cycle, all the environmental indicators. So often they're very narrow in what they assess.
For example, a product might be labeled as made with recycled materials, but if its manufacturing or disposal creates significant pollution, is it truly sustainable? For consumers, eco-labels can be a valuable tool, but only if we're approaching them with critical thinking. Look for certifications backed by credible third-party organizations, and if a label is focusing on a narrow aspect of sustainability, make sure to dig deeper into how that fits into the product's overall life cycle. Ultimately, no single label can tell the whole story. Understanding the limitations of eco-labels and balancing that with your own independent research is key to making truly sustainable choices. So with all this information about greenwashing, eco-labels, and the Competition Act, is this something that should be included in the education system?
I think rather than starting with people are going to try and trick you into thinking they're environmentally conscious, but actually they're all a bunch of cheats, I would start with, I think it's really important to have education about what actual environmental action is. Often it's what we don't do, right? It's like when we don't cut down the forest as opposed to we cut it down in a really responsible way. So I think starting with that, well, what is our actual understanding of what good is, helps forearm you for anyone who starts trying to tell you what their version of good is.
So where does this leave us? Greenwashing is undeniably complex, and it's not something that's going to be solved overnight, but we're starting to make some real progress. Legally, we're seeing promising changes. Starting in June of this year, the Canadian legal framework will allow the public to directly file lawsuits against companies engaged in greenwashing without having to wait for the Competition Bureau to take action. When people understand what genuine environmental action looks like, they can much more easily navigate the often murky waters of these corporate claims and actually apply pressure on businesses to adopt much more and much better sustainable practices.
I think the sort of like negative parts of these get so much airplay.
I think we put a lot of pressure on consumers.
No one likes being lied to, and like unmasking a villain like Scooby-Doo style has like this like satisfaction that we're just like, ha ha, I knew that they were rotten.
And here the lesson should not be that consumers are the only solution.
It's so seductive that I think it can sometimes like distract us from like the good work that should precede it.
Having good information about the environmental impacts is not only about making better consumption decisions, it's also about having a better understanding on our impacts generally. And some of these impacts need to be addressed through better consumption decisions, but others need to be addressed through systemic changes.
So like as much as I think we really should be insisting that when people say they're doing something good for the environment, they're actually doing it.
Absolutely.
And so keeping that goal in mind, because or else you can end up in this sort of, and I've heard people talk like this kind of almost like resigned or defeatist thing where it's like the whole system is broken and they just refuse to do anything until like the revolution comes. And it's like, we have to work with the tools we got.
We are also voters. We are also investors. Every day, if I'm getting very concrete, comprehensive information on the environmental impacts of every single decision that I make, then maybe that's not enough for me to change these decisions, but it's enough for me to vote differently and ask for policies that will help me make better decisions. The theory of change is not around just shifting the way we consume, but also shifting our degree of support for policies and for systemic change.